West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Okay, buried in this 60-page superseding indictment is an additional charge against Donald Trump concerning the willful retention of national defense information. Remember that Trump was already facing 31 counts of willful retention of the classified documents he hoarded down at Mar-a-Lago. But this new 32nd count is a bit different. This is for a presentation concerning military activity in a foreign country. And that charge answers a question that was raised by the previous indictment about whether Trump had a certain document in his possession when this conversation took place at his Bedminster Golf Club in 2021. Take a listen.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, you know. Mm-hmm. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information.
According to the superseding indictment, the document that Trump possessed and showed on July 21st, 2021, the one referenced in that very audio tape we just played, the document is charged as count 32 in this superseding indictment. Still with me tonight is former federal and state prosecutor Tali Farhadian-Weinstein. Tali, now we know that it wasn't just bluster, at least according to the DOJ. It sounds like Trump had the Iran war plans in his hand that he was waving around to whoever was in his office. Why are they charging this now?
So they've always had the document. Yeah. That we know. And remember, Alex, they had more than 100 documents and only charged 31, not 32. So they had made an initial decision of which to leave on the cutting room floor. And I think that there were two categories of things. One were the ones that didn't have jury appeal, I think, were too boring, maybe were technically classified, but didn't really tell you why this was a danger to the country, right, that he was retaining them. Then, of course, more importantly, in these cases, prosecutors often hold back ones that are so sensitive that they don't want to expose them in an open trial. And generally, the agencies that have what we call the equities in those documents that did the work in putting together
they're
information,
like, don't you dare.
Yes, they get to weigh in and say, no, it's not worth it to prosecute based on this one. So I think this fell into that pile. And they eventually got, I think, a witness who, or some other evidence that connected it to the waving around at Bedminster. And once they made that connection, they decided that it was worth including in the indictment. And I think that's for two reasons. One is, as we talked about a bit earlier, this means that this is going to get in front of the jury. Before, they would have had to litigate a bit whether evidence of an uncharged crime could come in, because that's generally considered prejudicial to a defendant to say, here are other bad things that he did that we're going to tell you about without charging him. So there are various rules for the admission of that evidence, and now they don't have to deal with that. They short circuit all of that. But I also think this just has a lot of jury appeal because it's so serious. Yeah. A war plan against Iran, and the reasons for waving it around or keeping it are so unserious.
Yes.
Exactly. And I would want to be able to say that sentence to a jury. And now they can.
And it sounds like the difference maker is they have someone who can confirm, who was in the room at that time in Bedminster. Yes, indeed, he was waving around the Iran war plans. The DOJ was like, oh, check, we have those in our possession. We got them back. And the first tranche of documents that were returned to us after we begged Trump for an unspecified number of months, they have them. They could say, we know that this was real. This was really the president waving around secret military plans to people to basically own Mark Milley, even though he didn't own Mark Milley. Own in the colloquial sense, not anyway. I got to ask you, as we talk about classified documents, NBC News' Laura Jarrett is reporting that Trump's lawyers are now requesting that Trump be able to discuss classified discovery outside of a classified setting, notably in his home. The prosecutors have responded, there is no basis for the defendant's request that he be given the extraordinary authority to discuss classified information at his residence. And it is particularly striking that he seeks permission to do so in the very location at which he is charged with willfully retaining the documents charged in this case. The irony, Tali, never been thicker.
Indeed. I think what he's saying with this really borderline frivolous motion is, I'm not like other defendants. And I don't want to be inconvenienced the way that other defendants are. Because, of course, when you are given access to these things as a defendant, you have to look at them in a SCIF with your lawyers, just like everybody else.
Classified information
facility. Indeed, exactly. And I think I actually felt kind of sorry for his lawyers when I read this motion, because this can't be good for their credibility with the court. I mean, it suggests that as a team, they are not taking seriously what is at stake here. And it seems to me that he made a calculation that it was more important for him to sort of puff up that he's a former president and wants to continue to be regarded as such first. Instead of sort of thinking about just the confines of this case.
I mean, literally asking to do the thing that he is being charged for. Can I look at classified information in my bathroom with a gold chandelier, please? No, absolutely not. You're not allowed to do that.
Maybe in some circular way, it backs up his defense that he was allowed to do this.
Well, also on the day when it's very clear that some of his employees are breaking with him and talking to the feds, this just seems like a dangerous legal strategy.
This one, I think, was just a real mistake.
Well, we are going to be following this. The questions will continue. I am so happy to have you on set. Thank you, Tali, for sharing your wisdom with us tonight. Tali Farhadian Weinstein. The other piece of this is there seems to be some kind of witness who played a key role in bringing this Bedminster audio tape, bringing that sort of kerfuffle, what are we going to call that? It's not being charged as a dissemination case. Bringing that incident down to Florida, right? Someone said the thing Trump was waving around was an actual Iran war document. And now the feds can charge Trump on that because they have in their possession the Iran war plan.
Yeah, but the way that they have the Iran war plan is revealed in this indictment, and it's surprising to me. So one of the things we see in this indictment is a list of all the documents, the classified documents that Trump is being charged with willfully and unlawfully retaining. That new document, the Iran war document, it has dates of when he unlawfully retained it. They all start January 20th, 2021. That's the day he left office. Most of them end June 3rd, 2022. That's the date that the DOJ and the FBI went down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with Evan Corcoran. But this one, the Iran war document, what's the end date on it? January 17th of 2022. That's the same day that Trump returned the first tranche of 15 boxes to the National Archives. And we know that because it's in the indictment as well.
But so why does that, what does that suggest? What do you draw from that? That they've had this document in their possession for a while. They didn't charge on it initially.
They might not have known that was, in fact, the document. And you were discussing earlier tonight with Tali Farhadian Weinstein that they must have also had a witness who could confirm for them, yes, that is the document I saw at that meeting in Bedminster in July of 2021.
And they can now bring in that episode to this trial, right? That seems important for public opinion, because the whole thing with this case is, well, how grave is it? How serious is it? And now they can bring into the courtroom in Florida, well, this is how serious it was. There were U.S. military plans to attack Iran, and the president was waving them around to just anybody. just so that he could basically have a war of words with Mark Milley and try and win that war.
That's right. And we've always known that that episode was enormous in terms of demonstrating Trump's intent, right? He says to the people assembled there, I shouldn't be showing you this, but look at this. Now we have the document in question. You'll remember that after the initial indictment, Trump told multiple media outlets, no, I never had a document, or I was rummaging around in my drawers. I have newspaper articles and all sorts of stuff. It must have been one of those. Oh, they were some plans. Oh, I really just meant golf course plans. He was all over the place in explaining what this was, but he repeatedly denied that he had a classified document that was shown to the people at Bedminster. We now know definitively that that is not true. The special counsel would not have put in the indictment that the document he waved around was in fact the document charged in count 32 unless they have very crystal clear evidence of that.
Yeah, well, the consciousness of guilt on all three, on the part of all of them, the hush, the shh emoji, the audio room, sneaking around the property, waving around the document, then lying about it, knowing that it was not declassified. It's all in there. It's a real read, this indictment.
It is Friday, the 28th of July of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, our little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, a liquid lunch, brunch, and dinner that we call Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. That's right. Well, not to worry, there is some nutritional sustenance in the midst of all this liquid delight, and that would be the olives. I don't know, maybe a celery stick. Have you seen what they're doing with Bloody Marys these days? My God. Jesus Christ, they either got to make bigger glasses to hold the monstrosities that they've constructed out of every kind of food stuff that you can find dried out in the fridge. My God. I'm serious. They got to get bigger glasses to hold this stuff. You know, big goblets. A pretty good base, too. You don't want it tipping over. Yeah. Actually, sometimes that's dinner. Just that drink. It's dinner. And then people can go home and say, don't worry, I had dinner. Question is, did they have dinner with their Bloody Mary, or did they have Bloody Mary with their dinner? I don't know. The more stuff they put on there, I guess the less alcohol they have to put in. That's what I'm afraid of. Anyway, you can rest assured that we will use some quite lovely garnishes on all of our cocktails here. But maybe all of the dried out vegetables and pickles that we might have in the fridge, we might back off a bit on that. Okay, I guess. Hey, it is Friday and we have a busy day, not only with all the news, you know, superseding indictment Thursdays was quite something, and it's going to continue into today. But we do have a bit of busy work ahead of us here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And, you know, back there at the chef's table, too, but still. And also in real life as well. So why don't we give you a rundown on what we have in store for you, and then we'll have to get into it, and we may have another kind of lengthy clip because I have to run and take care of Mom and do a bunch of things in the midst of all this. So I apologize for some of that, but you're still getting pertinent information to, well, go out and face the day, the night, the morning, the dusk, the dawn. Wherever it is that you are, you'll be facing it. So we're here to help. Okay, starting off in the Bistro Cafe at the top, Jack Smith did wait until now to charge Trump for that secret Iran document he flaunted on tape. Now, it was audio tape. We didn't see it, but you could hear it. And now we have the tape. We have the document. And he should not have had that. To the point that he might have to go to jail. And I say might because somehow this slippery devil always slips away. Then on the rest of the menu, Texas is shutting down libraries in the blackest school district in the state and turning them into child prisons. And I am not kidding. Misleading women on abortion could cost Illinois crisis pregnancy centers big bucks because, you can't practice medicine without a license, at least in democratic states. And protected by SHIELD laws, U.S. health workers are able to skirt state bans on women's health. And it's not just abortion. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Japan's annual defense paper raised new alarms about China's military, its ties to Russia, and Taiwan tensions. And Switzerland, Finland, and Sweden are considering joining the U.S. National Guard Security Partnership Program. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for doing so. Across the page from that chat room link to the left and then down just a skosh is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and possibly send us what you might spend on, well, I don't know, how about an espresso-type coffee drink? If you could send those funds to us once a month, thereby, well, buying us a coffee once a month. It really does help us, all kidding aside. It does help us. And how does it help us? Because it helps us by the gain of the fact that we're able to pool those resources with other like-minded individuals' Patreonages and whittle down the enormity of these bills that keep coming in. And we keep paying them off. And somehow we're flying under the radar to continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for over a dozen years. And so we have you to thank for your generosity in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many years ago. And I'm not kidding. I'm not. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, and now Blue Sky. I think I did something over or tried to get on Post. I don't know. At some point, I even questioned whether I wanted to get on Blue Sky, but I got an invite and I got over there, so I suppose, as much exposure as we can get, we will. But anyway, you can follow me on all of those platforms and more, probably, at Justice Putnam. I'm everywhere. And you can also check out the show notes and links diary that I post on Daily Co's. That gets auto-posted because I auto-post it to come up 10 minutes before showtime. And that's where the real reportage is. So we want you to look over the actual documents because, we riff a little bit, just a little. You can also follow the show on Twitter because it's a placemat there at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. Just not Stitcher anymore because SiriusXM sucks. Yeah, that's like consonants, isn't it? I think so. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Wait, I haven't even started drinking these French 77s yet, and that is the cocktail of choice here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Just so you know, on Fridays, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. But back to the matter at hand. David Badash of the New Civil Rights Movement brings us this first offering. The U.S. Independent School District, the largest in Texas and the 8th largest in the United States, and I should add, the blackest school district in Texas, will eliminate librarian positions in 28 schools and turn libraries into what are being called discipline centers. You know, child prisons. Mike Miles, the state-installed school superintendent and former charter school CEO. Oh, another way of eliminating public schools. They've been on this jag for almost as long as they've been trying to get rid of abortion. Maybe even longer. Well, he announced earlier this month cuts of up to 600 central office positions. Texas has a $32 billion state surplus, but rather than allocate needed funds to public schools, lawmakers in the majority Republican state legislature, at the behest of Greg Abbott, just delivered a massive property tax cut. The move to gut librarians and massively reduce access to books and other materials does not appear to be budget-related, as librarians will be allowed to apply for other positions. You know, like assistant to the assistant of a janitor. Connor of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Illinois crisis pregnancy centers, which often pop up near abortion facilities to offer information about alternatives, could face penalties if they disseminate misleading or untruthful information. The move is another Democratic effort to insulate the state's virtually unfettered access to abortion, even as neighboring states restrict it. Hey, John, mellow out, man. Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker signed legislation on yesterday, to immediately apply the state's consumer protection statute to the pregnancy centers, which are non-medical facilities that offer some services to pregnant women and girls, such as ultrasound. They often discourage abortion by using counseling, material support, and or housing in an effort to persuade women to bring their pregnancies to term. You mean like illegal coercion? The pregnancy centers wasted little time challenging the law's constitutionality. The National Institute of Family and Life Advocates, a national network of pregnancy help centers, and several centers in Illinois, filed a federal lawsuit in Rockford seeking a restraining order and injunction against the state's enforcement. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists says crisis pregnancy centers represent themselves as legitimate reproductive health care clinics providing care for pregnant people, but actually aim to dissuade people from accessing certain types of reproductive health care, including abortion care and even contraceptive options. The centers are often supported by groups that oppose abortion, and as unregulated non-medical sites, they're under no obligation to follow federal health care privacy law. Editorial Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is brought by staff from the Agence France Presse. For weeks, American nurse Lauren Jacobson has been supervising the daily dispatch of around 50 parcels of abortion pills, mostly to states where it is illegal to terminate a pregnancy, such as Texas. For the 31-year-old, prescribing the drugs is an active form of resistance. People in Texas deserve the same basic human rights and access to health care as people in Connecticut, she told the AFP. The effort is coordinated by the activist group Aid Access. Between mid-June and mid-July, it sent abortion pills to 3,500 people living in states where abortions are illegal, prescribed by 7 healthcare providers. Their participation in the program has been possible thanks to newly enacted shield laws in 5 states, Massachusetts, Colorado, Vermont, New York, and Washington. These laws protect them in the event of prosecution by states where abortion is prohibited. Any request for documents or extradition will be refused, and their license to practice and malpractice insurance cannot be threatened. But it's still uncharted territory in a deeply polarized country where the religious right objects strongly to terminations, while progressives view access to the procedure as a human right. The situation is emblematic of the battle between progressive and conservative states since the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the federal right to abortion in June of 2022. Through shield laws, Democratic-run states aim to effectively limit the scopes of bans enacted by Republican-run states, especially if more doctors and nurses join. California could also pass a similar law in the fall. Before these laws were established, Aid Access was already active in the United States, but all its prescriptions were going through its founder, a Dutch doctor. The result was long wait times with the pills sent from India. But since American providers took over in June, shipping has taken only a few days, as it all happens within the United States. Linda Prine, a New York doctor involved in Aid Access, told AFP. Well, I would suggest more states get on board with this, because the only way to fight it is to fight it. Okay, now that you got that little tidbit of wisdom, and it was a little tidbit, let us now go to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, strap in for a raunchy ride. While the formula for Joyride is familiar, a buddy road trip comedy featuring a group of mismatched friends, Joyride is still a first. A mainstream comedy written, directed, and starring Asian American women. Featuring Ashley Park, best known for her work as Emily in Paris, Joyride is about a type A attorney who's visiting China for the first time after being adopted as a baby by a white couple in the Pacific Northwest. Park's character Audrey is going to her native land to close a business deal for her law firm that could make or break her career. Since her Mandarin is practically non-existent, she brings along her slackerish, artist best friend Lolo to be her interpreter, along with Lolo's tag-along cousin Deadeye. Upon arrival in China, the trio meets up with Audrey's former college roommate Kat, played by Oscar nominee Stephanie Chu. Hijinks then ensue with the quartet's adventures going well beyond Audrey's attempts to close the deal. It'd be a spoiler to disclose the things they get up to, but it's safe to say it's the type of raunch usually reserved for male buddy movies. In addition to portraying Asian American women beyond the usual stereotypes, the movie also takes a surprisingly touching and poignant turn in dealing with themes of identity and belonging and the conflict many foreign-born adoptees feel between their cultural heritage and the culture in which they were raised. While Park is fine as Audrey, the real scene stealer is Sherry Cola, who shines in her role as Lolo. Cola has phenomenal comedic timing and the ability to give her character depth while avoiding caricature. A good break from summer blockbusters, Joyride's a ride that anyone with a sense of humor will enjoy. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and beat us back on our channel on YouTube.
Slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it.
I get it, slip it, cuff it, check it twice a day.
I get it, slip it, cuff it, check it in the morning and before dinner.
I get it, slip it, cuff it, check it, and share it with my doctor. Nearly 1 in 2 U.S. adults have high blood pressure. That's why it's important to self-monitor your blood pressure in 4 easy-to-remember steps. It starts with a monitor.
Now that I know my blood pressure numbers, I talked with my doctor. We're getting those numbers down.
Get it, slip it, cuff it, check it. Talk to doctor now and share it.
Be next to talk to your doctor about your blood pressure numbers. Get down with your blood pressure. Self-monitoring is power. Learn more at manageyourbp.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the American Heart Association, and the American Medical Association. In partnership with the Office of Minority Health and Health Resources and Services Administration.
This is Cosmos Quickly, and I'm Lee Billings. In this episode, we're talking with a nuclear historian about the new Christopher Nolan blockbuster, Oppenheimer, a film about one of the most complex and tragic figures of the early atomic age. I'm very pleased to welcome Alex Wellerstein to Cosmos Quickly. Alex is a nuclear historian and professor at the Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken, New Jersey, and the author of the 2021 book, Restricted Data, The History of Nuclear Secrecy in the United States. And Alex, welcome to the program.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here.
We're going to be talking about Christopher Nolan's new film, Oppenheimer, which Alex and I both saw at a pre-screening event a few days ago, and it blew our socks off in more ways than one. Should be a fun conversation. Tell us a little more about what you know about Oppenheimer, what your relationship to Oppenheimer is, and how that influenced how you viewed this movie.
I've been sort of thinking about Oppenheimer as a person and his history for about 20 years. And so it's a little odd to watch a movie about someone you've spent a lot of time reading their letters, their FBI files, their security hearing transcripts. I take some credit for essentially finding the unredacted versions of the security hearing transcript, which had been mislabeled and misfiled by the National Archives, and I found them on a lucky check. I've been thinking about Oppenheimer a long time, and trying to make sense of him. I'm not a biographer of Oppenheimer, so I'm not like in love with Oppenheimer. I haven't sort of internalized him as my hero subject. I think he's a pretty complicated character, and I'm interested in him as a complicated character and as part of the sort of complicated times.
Complicated times. And just to be clear, if it's not clear, we're talking about J. Robert Oppenheimer, the founding director of the Los Alamos National Laboratory, often seen as the father of the nuclear weapons program in the United States and the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
First, your initial thoughts of the film. I'd love to get just your pocket review.
It's a hard pocket review. I'm going to be seeing it again in a couple days, and I'm hoping that after that I will have a sense of how I really feel about the film. I had a friend ask me recently, like, "Oh, was it a good movie?" And I was like, "I don't know, right? Like, it depends what you mean by good movie. Like, it's not a fun movie to watch. It's not meant to be a fun movie. Is it an interesting portrait of Oppenheimer? Yeah. Does it do a better version of Oppenheimer than a lot of other film versions? Yes.
What exactly is the average person supposed to get from this movie? Because while it does, I think, take great pains to be considerably accurate, both in a scientific and a technical and a historical sense, it's a little overwhelming, and it's 3 hours, but there's so much squeezed in there. As an amateur scholar of nuclear history and not a professional like you, I found myself overwhelmed. I found myself very confused at points. I was wondering if I can't connect all these different dots, if I can understand, who's that background character playing the bongos? Oh, that's Richard Feynman. What hope does the average person have?
Yeah, I have no idea. It's a really tall order. I'm sympathetic with the tall order of it. It's clear that Nolan wanted to do a lot of justice to the historical material. He does not distort it for the purpose of the narrative as much as a lot of previous people have. He doesn't just – it's not a standard biopic with the standard arc, right? We've all seen the Johnny Cash films, right? Like they're great. It's a great film. We feel good about it. It has nothing to do with the reality. That's fine, right? We kind of know that. It's not like that at all. I respect that it's very deliberately made. So as a work of art, it's challenging for a blockbuster summer film. I told my friend, if you want to watch a fun movie, the Barbie one looks like it's going to be a lot more fun. This is not a fun movie. It doesn't mean it's not a useful or important movie, but it's not a fun movie.
Yeah, that's kind of what I want to get at is that it's not every day that you get a blockbuster like this, or a director, a screenwriter of this caliber, a cast of this quality coming together to kind of give you an excuse to talk about some of these issues that underpin a lot of our modern society and our global civilization, really. I know that sounds very sweeping, but I mean, if you're not going to talk about nuclear weapons in that context, then what are you really talking about? And of course, there's this element of, again, kind of being bound by what's happened. I mean, in the same way that when James Cameron did the Titanic, spoiler alert, it sinks. Almost everybody dies. With Oppenheimer, spoiler alert, he has a remarkable rise and is at the pinnacle of the U.S. and the global nuclear establishment. And then he has this tragic fall from grace that comes about through the increased perception or need for security, for more national security measures to try to not necessarily put the nuclear genie back in the bottle, but just try to manage the damage, I guess.
It's tricky. You could imagine a film that doesn't do the second half of the arc, and Nolan tries to do everything. He tries to do Oppenheimer before he's on the Manhattan Project. He tries to do Oppenheimer on the Manhattan Project. He tries to do Oppenheimer in the Cold War. Like, that's a lot to do in one film.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, I bet this would be better if it was multiple films or like a miniseries, right? Like, I bet if he could have a little bit more, if he could have 5 hours and that wasn't an overwhelming ask, that he could do all of these things and it would feel more satisfying. But because he only has 3 hours, and the fact that it's almost exactly 3 hours, that feels like a studio compromise type of situation.
Release the Nolan cut. I want the 5 hour.
I want the 10-hour op, and I want the extended. I want Peter Jackson, eat your heart out, right? But like that's, to me, is part of the choices he made as well. And on the one hand, I respect the choice. Like, covering Oppenheimer's early period is an interesting way to try and get into his character. I don't think he quite covers enough for it to be successful. Similarly, obviously the Los Alamos story is really important. I feel like he also doesn't cover enough. And similarly, the end of after Los Alamos, after World War II, he doesn't quite cover enough. And so there's this, I get this paradox where on the one hand, I'm saying it's way too long and there's too much. And there's another hand I'm saying, and he doesn't quite get, it's the like bad food in so small portions, right? It doesn't, it's a tricky thing. I respect him trying to do it. On the other hand, it does, to me, make it a tricky film to watch.
Was Oppenheimer ultimately successful? Do we live in a world that he really profoundly helped shape, not just from the detonations of Trinity and
Fat Man, Little Boy.
Yeah. But also through if we look at how nuclear nonproliferation occurs today, it's through the IAEA, I guess, also doing these sorts of inspections, and it does focus a lot on capability and on how much uranium do you have, how much of it is enriched, et cetera, to what degree. So was Oppenheimer, you think, ultimately kind of successful?
I think he would have seen himself as unsuccessful. And yeah, some of these things come up in later ways. One thing they say in the movie quite correctly is that Oppenheimer never expresses regret for World War II or what he did. I think there's a big misconception about Oppenheimer is that he regretted his activities and killing, so many people. He never expressed that regret. He always maintained that he didn't regret it and that it was important to do at the time. And they do get some of this across in the movie. Like, his view was that the best thing you could do with the first nuclear weapons was make their use so horrible that maybe nobody would want to use them again. And in that sense, maybe he was successful. I do think he was successful in the sense that we have, not just we today, but like Harry Truman came away thinking these are not regular weapons. These should not be used lightly. But like, I think that that's an important successful thing. But I think he would have felt unsuccessful because he felt that the worst case scenario would be a world in which nuclear weapons are made by the thousands and they are made in many, many megatons. And you have nations pointing them at each other with a hair trigger, and that this is inevitably going to, at some point in time, lead to more nuclear weapons use, and it'll be even worse. And I think he would have felt that he ultimately was unsuccessful in getting what he wanted. And that the world today, though, yes, it's not as bad. We haven't all died in a fiery nuclear holocaust, but that's a pretty low bar, right? Like he would see the current state of the world as being exceedingly dangerous and not where we need to be at all. Like it's still not at the right place, and it's not clear how you get to the right place.
What I find most interesting about the movie is where we go from here. It's nice to look at the past and what's come, but what does it tell us about the future? What are the conversations that you would like to see come out of this being kind of a pop cultural moment?
There are a lot of different ways you can try to make a World War II atomic bomb movie or an Oppenheimer movie, right? And like what has been done in the past is usually Oppenheimer, great hero, hooray, a great triumph of science, hurrah. You can have rise and fall, tragedy, and there's some of that, of course, in here. But he's really trying to make this also about like the world we live in and the sort of dark views of what's coming next. And that is a big part of actually Oppenheimer's worldview. I almost wish there was a way to do more of that in the movie. And again, if there had been anything on international control, like that's what that's about. That's the conversation. It's also the answer to some of these sort of puzzles raised by the movie. Like why does Oppenheimer support working on the H-bomb during World War II but not later? And part of that is because he's interested in the H-bomb during World War II because it's the promise of the thing to come. The World War II atomic bombs, you can imagine, these are kind of just like efficient versions of what we can already do. We can already destroy cities with firebombs. Why not just do it in one bomb? But the initial supers they're imagining range from 10 to 100 megatons. They do a calculation at Los Alamos during the war or just after it about how many of those you need to set off to make the atmosphere radioactively uninhabitable. And they do this with the World War II bombs, and they do this with their ideas of the super. And with the World War II bombs, you need like 10,000 going off, which during World War II, that feels like a long way away. They're doing a lot of work just to make 3, right? With the supers, they come down to between like 10 and 100. That is very achievable, right? Now, it turns out they're wrong, hooray. But like, I just bring this up that's the context of what Oppenheimer's thinking about with the super. He brings this up at meetings with politicians like Henry Stimson, who the Secretary of War, where he's trying to influence them to get very dedicated to this idea of international control, of banning nuclear weapons. And he's successful. I mean, the film kind of does Stimson dirty. It makes him look like a sort of foolish politician. He is not a foolish politician. Stimson is the guy who he gets all this. He believes that view. He goes to Truman and says, we need to negotiate with the Soviet Union to ban nuclear weapons or we'll all die. The first meeting Stimson has with Truman to tell him about the atomic bomb when Truman becomes president, he prefaces it by saying, like, we are going to be in a position to end civilization if we don't make the right decisions. Like, he is not treating this trivially at all. He has bought that line that he's getting from not just Oppenheimer, but a few other key people. And I sort of wish they had been able to do a little bit more with that. But like, to me, that's the more interesting thing than even the standard World War II version, the scientific triumph, even the Oppenheimer's personal, failings and losing the clearance. It's okay. So what are the options for the world moving forward? And to me, the really powerful thing about studying this period, especially the period that's not in the film, it was a period in which it felt like there were options and choices. And we end up in a world where it doesn't feel like there's any choices. And it's really hard to get people today to think about there being any choices. People will tell you straight up, I don't know how you can't possibly do anything about the state of the world, about nuclear weapons. There's no way to move forward. Of course, we need them, blah, blah, blah. And we do have choices. And I'm not saying they're easy choices. I'm not saying we all hug each other and sing Kumbaya and everybody gets rid of the weapons. There are practical ways to think about, okay, what would we need to do to get into a world where We are not existentially threatened by nuclear warfare. It doesn't even necessarily mean getting rid of all the weapons, though there's a lot of people who'd prefer that. It could mean reducing the number to a level where it's not existential if they got used. Is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. But those are the kinds of conversations that I think people ought to be having in a more broad way, not just seeing it as a sort of simple issue. And so if the movie in any way encourages that, I would say big success.
Beautiful. Alex, thank you for sitting down with me today to talk about this movie and about its reflections and echoes and shadows of real life. Cosmos Quickly is a part of Scientific American's podcast, Science Quickly. If you like the show, please give us a rating or review. This show was produced by Talika Bose, Kelso Harper, Jeff Delvicio, and Corinne Leong. Our show's music was composed by Dominic Smith. And before you go, please consider supporting independent journalism like this. Become a Scientific American subscriber today. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify. For Cosmos Quickly, I'm Lee Billings.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
What's the story on Supreme Court justices and ethical standards? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The Senate Judiciary Committee has voted in favor of legislation that would impose new ethical rules on the members of the Supreme Court. The proposal has come about because of the recent revelations about justices having received lavish vacations and private jet trips and educational expenses for a relative paid for by politically involved billionaires, none of which did they disclose. All of which we know about only because of investigative reporting. To these revelations, various justices have responded that they broke no law or ethical rules because nothing requires them to reveal this information. And indeed, ethics laws that apply to other federal judges and members of Congress don't cover the Supreme Court, which is what the proposed legislation would change by requiring justices to abide by the same ethical and disclosure rules as members of Congress. Nothing more and nothing less. Which is a horrible idea, according to South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham, who has announced that the bill has no chance in the Senate, where 60 votes are necessary to overcome a filibuster. As for the House, pundits say the bill wouldn't survive a vote there either. So, the answer to the question, has the time come for the Supreme Court to be bound to unambiguous written ethical standards regarding disclosure and transparency? The answer to that question apparently is no. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1932. That was the day that flames burnt in the U.S. Capitol. The U.S. Armed Forces set fire to a shanty town of unemployed World War I veterans. The veterans had come to the Capitol to demand the bonus that they had been promised for their service. The payment was not due until 1945, but the nation was in the throes of the Great Depression. Desperate veterans demanded the bonus be paid early. Walter W. Walters, a veteran and unemployed former cannery worker, called for his fellow veterans to go to Washington, D.C. and demand payment. From across the country, veterans answered the call. Many hopped trains to make their way to the nation's capital. They called themselves the Bonus Expeditionary Force. This echoed the American Expeditionary Force, the name for U.S. troops that had fought in France during World War I. In May, the veterans began to arrive in Washington, D.C. They set up tents and shelters in vacant lots and open spaces. The largest encampment was along the Anacostia River. Some in Washington began to warn that the 8,000 protesters of the Bonus Army were led by communists. But retired Marine Corps Major General Smedley Butler came to the camp to encourage the protesters. He said,
"I never saw such fine Americanism as is exhibited by you people. You have just as much right to have a lobby here as any steel corporation. Makes me so damn mad a whole lot of people, speak of you as tramps. By God, they didn't speak of you as tramps in 1917 and 18. No.
But Army Chief of Staff General MacArthur was less sympathetic. He ordered troops to clear out the veterans. With cavalry, tanks, rifles, and tear gas, they ousted the protesters and burnt the Anacostia River encampment to the ground.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the diner of life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, because there's lots more of us where we come from. It is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs of around 90, and we will be sunny throughout the day with winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear skies overnight, lows in the mid to upper 50s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10, and then mainly sunny tomorrow with highs around 90, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. So it looks like we'll continue our cooling trend through the weekend, where we're only around 90. And then in the middle of the week, we'll start inching back up into those triple digits. Maybe not quite that hot. Except here at the mothership, we do. Let's see now. Grass pollen is now moderate here at the little village of Rogue River, and that's been the case for the last several days. The air quality index for the region is good at 16 parts per million. Our air advisory has been dropped, so that's good to see. The daytime UV index has inched back up to very high at level 9, so take care if you have those numbers in the area that you live. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.06 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is drying out at 62%. And it's dropping. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. And that is literally the Weather Underground. London is 72 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 75 and with rain and a thunder advisory and a flood advisory. Rome is 86 and sunny. Kyiv is 74 and fair. Kabul is 75 and clear. Hong Kong is 88 and fair, except for the people who want democratic reforms. Tokyo is 82 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 47 and partly cloudy. It's winter there, you know. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and partly cloudy with a small craft advisory for fog on the bay. And New York is 86 degrees Fahrenheit, sunny with a heat advisory because they don't have air conditioning there. And heat rises. And when you're in a high rise, the heat rises. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The Japanese government stepped up its alarm over Chinese assertiveness, warning in a report issued today, Friday, that the country faces its worst security threat since World War II, as it plans to implement a new strategy that calls for a major military buildup. The 2023 Defense White Paper, approved by Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's cabinet, is the first since the government adopted a controversial new national security strategy in December, then seen as a break from Japan's post-war policy limiting the use of force to only self-defense. China, Russia, and North Korea contribute to the most severe and complex security environment since the end of World War II, according to the 510-page report. It says China's external stance and military activities have become a serious concern for Japan and the international community and present an unprecedented and the greatest strategic challenge. On Thursday, Russian and Chinese delegates joined North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in North Korea's capital for a military parade that showed off the Hermit Kingdom's latest drones and long-range nuclear-capable missiles. Russia and China have also stepped up strategic ties, the white paper said, noting 5 joint bomber flights since 2019. The report predicted that China will also possess 1,500 nuke warheads by 2035 and increase its military superiority over Taiwan in what Japan views as a security threat, especially to its southwestern islands, including Okinawa. We have a base there, don't we? So far.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Tara Kopp of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Switzerland, Finland, and Sweden are considering joining the U.S. National Guard Security Partnership Program in a further expansion of American military ties across Europe after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The chief of the National Guard, General Dan Hokanson, announced the discussions with each country, which had not previously been reported in remarks at the National Press Club on yesterday. Interest by the 3 countries in the program is the latest indication of how Russia's war has led each of those nations to take steps that consider ending long-standing policies of military non-alignment. The National Guard State Partnership Program is a lesser-known military but key military instrument for U.S. troops to build relationships with foreign militaries by conducting regular training and education exchanges with young officers. It partners National Guard units with host nations. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.